Next in our lineup of experts this week is Kevin Dixon, founder and CEO of BoxStep, a B2B SaaS sales platform that complements CRM by focusing on the buyer committee and aligning selling with buying. Kevin has spent his entire sales career in complex and enterprise sales, including 20 years in executive leadership positions. This includes Ericsson, Siemens, and Logica, plus successful startup Ilata, who were the original pioneers for app download to mobile devices. His experience spans startups, mid-size, as well as global corporations, privately owned, VC invested, as well as publicly listed. He's managed small sales teams launching in new markets as well as large global sales organizations with sales quotas of over 200 million. Kevin, delightful as always to meet you and chat with you. I have always gone back learning a lot. So I'm really glad that I could get you on the fixing the 5% conversion problem in B2B sales limited series that we are running on our show on the Sales Experts channel. Welcome.
Thank you, as usual, for having me, Subhanjan.
Before we move on, to set the context, tell us a bit about your current work, what you're focused on. I know, but there may be viewers who would like to know, and so they get a sense of why I think it is so vital that you come on the show and talk.
Okay. I am like the elderly relative who's lived through several world wars. And has all the experiences of stuff. You know, I'm one of those guys where you can look back, because I've been in the trenches a long time, you see how things have changed and the problems before are different problems than we have today. I spent a career in complex and enterprise sales. So what's a complex and enterprise sales? Typically larger deals, longer sales cycles. So I worked with organizations, senior exec positions with the likes of Ericsson before moving into stuff like you and I do now, which is startups. So 20 odd years in Ericsson selling to key enterprise. Then I started to do my first startup, which was very successful. I was the SVP of sales on the board of a company called Ilata, which we were the pioneers of what everyone does today, which is download applications to their mobile phones. And we were out there selling to the mobile phone operators before everything moved to the App Store and Google Play. So I've done a bunch of others, startups, really, where I've been brought in to sort of do those sort of things. But I've seen everything change. And that's the reason I created BoxStep. Where we've gone from selling to a few people to selling to a lot of people, which involves people management. Everyone's got CRM. You love it or you hate it, but we've got to deal with it. But it doesn't do everything. CRM's a seller-centric tool. You and I both know that. It has its place, but we're now living in a buyer-centric marketplace if we want to be successful. So I created something really to complement CRM, which is you've got all your sales processes and your measurements and opportunities, but now how do we create a platform that complements CRM by sort of focusing more on the buyer and creating a bunch of tools like relationship mapping, mutual action plans, etc., to help your buyers to buy. Sounds like a mouthful, but we've got to rethink it. And that's where BoxStep was born out of.
Couldn't agree with you more. And, I'm pretty passionate about this subject and I've spent a lot of time thinking and talking about it. To shift focus to the topic in hand today, one of the things that we somehow don't talk enough in B2B sales is the abysmally low rate of conversion. If you look at people like Forrester, they have mentioned a figure like 1.8%. If you look across, you will find this is still a single digit conversion that we are talking of across geographies and across verticals and industries. What got us here, Kevin?
It's an interesting one. So I think one of the things you have to look at is there was a time when most of us sold typically in the same way, which was face-to-face. And now there are different types of sales. So I don't think I can have a sweeping statement and say, here's the reason why it's all gone wrong. Because you still got people who, we've got this more sort of, office-based, remote inside sales, SDRs, all those different people who are selling potentially on sort of shorter sales cycles. And you still got the field guys who are working 9, 12, 18 months. I've seen 2 or 3 year deals. So I don't think there's a one size fits all reason for those things. But I look at sales, and I'm not a sales trainer, and there's a lot of sales trainers and experts and gurus who tell us what we're doing wrong. And I still think they're overcomplicating it. So I can break, there's a lot of reasons why I think they're things, but the starting reason is a simple one: pressure. I don't know if anyone on your show's ever talked about pressure. So what do I mean by that? Selling used to be, I talk about selling in the old days where it was, it wasn't that long ago, but it was more of a comfortable career. It was difficult to get fired for underperformance or not achieving KPIs. Companies were more tolerant. And guess what? When you were bidding, sometimes you're only bidding against 2, 3, 4 competitors. That has ramped up. Nowadays, we're competing against a huge amount of competitors. Competitors are easier to discover. The outreach that they're doing is far more significant. Everybody's getting bombarded by salespeople. So because it's a more competitive space, because there is more pressure on activities and numbers, it all puts pressure on salespeople. And one of the other things as well, they're pressurized because everyone's got a target or a quota. Some of those quotas have become ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. Now, you and I probably remember the days when we run sales teams and we go, do you know what? The combined quota of my team is X. Before I give it all out to them, I'm going to put 10% stretch in it, maybe 15% stretch. What I'm seeing now is sometimes I'm hearing 50 to 100% stretch on the combined actual targets before they distribute them to the salespeople. So straight from the get-go, salespeople have got numbers that are outrageously high. Outrageously high. Not everyone, don't get me wrong, a lot of companies still fair, but there's still a lot there. So immediately there's a pressure on salespeople to achieve numbers. And then they get involved in desperation selling. Yeah. They start to think, I've got to make numbers, I've got to do lots of things, shortcut selling, and you end up doing the wrong things in the wrong way. Yeah. And if you start from a foundation of poor quality, the results end up as poor quality. So I think we're in a society now driven by huge amount of KPIs, really low tolerance for performance. We've all seen now the tenure of salespeople and sales leaders shrink down to next to nothing. So you're seeing okay, I'm a new sales guy, arrive at company. It takes me a little while to ramp up. Yeah. So I've got to get those opportunities and I've got to convert the opportunities. I'm going to make mistakes. So every time salespeople are flipping to the next one, they're up in sort of ramp up mode again. So I think pressure is one of the biggest reasons. So we've created a sales environment now that is more cutthroat, more pressurized, and more demanding on salespeople than ever before, and demanding sometimes to do lots of the wrong things rather than the right number of the right things. So I don't know if you agree with that.
I totally. I mean, in fact, you touched upon 2 points which I have been sort of bringing up over and over through this series. One is how we set quota. The fact that, again, I'm going to quote known numbers. The fact that between 50 and 60% of the people, of the sales folks, do not attain more than 60% of the quota is an indicator which is hanging there for the last several years. And obviously, we're not learning anything from it. One of the biggest issues, I totally agree with you, is how we are setting quota. Is there a scientific basis to what we are doing, keeping in mind the number of increased competition? And look, make no mistake, it's a software-driven world, which means if you are selling a software product, you will have lot more competitors than the physical world had. That's a given. I mean, there's nothing surprising about it. We know. I mean, anybody can build another software which does pretty much the same things that the existing stuff does, right? The other thing is, which you mentioned, is the way the leadership is looking at the sales function, which is again getting reflected at the constantly shortening tenure of the sales leadership itself. I'm told that the average duration, I mean, tenure of a VP sales is 18 months. I mean, tell me, what risk is he going to take
I,
in 18
I,
months?
I heard 15 months,
Oh,
but
you
it's
have
probably
15 months.
somewhere
Okay,
there or
there you go.
thereabouts. But yeah, it's short. It's short. If you think my first exec sales leadership role was 20 years, and don't get me wrong, it was highly successful, but it was highly successful in a different time. There was more fruit on the trees. There was more tolerance. There was less performance pressure in organizations. But I think about. I remember a CEO once said to me, because he talked about the targets, and I said, well, that's a ridiculous number. How you calculate it? And he was pretty honest. He said, oh, it's an aspirational target. It's one that I aspire to achieve. I said, well, you're setting yourself up to fail then, and you're putting pressure downwards that's going to drive the wrong behavior. Salespeople are going to be forced to go after really poorly thought out, qualified deals because of this aspirational target. If you create a quota, you've got to look at what is the market? What is the real market that gets spent a year? And what's a realistic percentage that market we can try and achieve based on size of our organization, our proposition levels, level of competition, et cetera, et cetera. And then you're really sort of focusing around real numbers. But if you start to get that right start with, and the right process, if you reduce the pressure on people and some of these ridiculous KPIs that everyone's measured on now, extensive, don't get me wrong, there's still some really valuable ones, but pressure creates the wrong behavior activities with people.
Yeah.
People chase stuff that is a pointless thing to chase. So you end up with, a deal that never happened because it was never a deal for you. And that sort of brings me on to the second point. And it's a pretty boring one that everyone talks about, qualification.
Yeah.
I see it day in, day out. I talk to sales leaders, I talk to salespeople, and even now, it's one of the biggest subjects that's talked about by every sales expert and guru and author and everything all the time, qualification. And so many people are using Medic. You've still got some Luddites that are using Bant, and I hate Bant and that. And if they're all doing it, why is there still a problem? If everyone's saying, oh yeah, we got Medic and we got this, that, and that, why is there still such a significant problem? And largely, I don't necessarily think that Medic has some valuable attributes. Bant has none. I'm probably going to get some Bant lovers that hate me now. But I have a very simplistic view about it, and actually I share Keenan's thoughts. If you know Keenan, Keenan's a great guy. He's a passionate guy. He gets a bit fruity in the mouth every now and then, but I don't hold that against him because he talks a lot of sense. And he talks about qualification, the simplest way to be thinking about the right deal to try and win. Because if you're going after the right deal, then that percentage, that 1.8 or 5% thing, it's going to increase. So the key thing is, does the customer have a business problem that needs solving? Is the customer committed to solving that business problem? Does the customer believe that your proposition will solve that problem for them? When you start to take it down to that simplistic level, I'm not sure what else you need to think about. Because when people start saying, oh, you've got to know if there's a budget. If it's a business problem, they'll find a budget. Yeah. If it's really serious, whether or not you have got the economic buyer and the criteria, those sort of things come. But if you don't start with the right part, is, the whole problem-centric mentality, I think you're going to end up going after deals that are going to contribute to this low number of performance. Right. The amount of jobs I've had where I've started a new job, and the first thing I do is I do a purge of the pipeline. Too many companies have vanity pipelines. Well, you must have 4 times your quota as an ongoing pipeline. So it gets stuffed full of crap, and you go through it and you go, well, that's not qualified. Why, da. And before you know it, it's probably ends up about half of what you started with. But people say, leave it as it is. That's our vanity pipeline. So, and that still is driven by the pressure which we started with. The pressure leads to vanity pipelines, chasing deals that are badly qualified, which ultimately leads to a low performance in terms of conversion rate. So, and I ask people all the time, what's your ICP, ideal customer profile? It's too broad, too generic. They don't understand why the customers that buy from them, why they buy from them. They don't understand, they can't articulate what problem for the customer they're truly solving. So I think that's going to help from an organizational view if you start to really drill down, put great minds in your organization together to work out, what's your best customer, why they're going to buy from you, why they're not going to buy from you, because the old adage is get to a no quickly in qualification. Perfect. Don't waste time. You can't win everything. Don't try and ram a square peg into a round hole, and I see that happening a lot.
Absolutely. So one point that you make is very critical. This vanity KPIs, where they sort of percolate, it percolates into vanity metrics that we follow, and we are sort of dished out by various sales tools, which have no bearing whatsoever. It looks nice and fancy, it's a nice dashboard with lots of stuff, but it means nothing if those three questions that you asked first have no correlation with those matrices, right? So,
Yeah, yeah.
so
We move very, don't get me wrong, science in selling is a significant part of our future. But people have moved from the art to the science, almost like full transformation. And science is the dominant part. You've got to find the blend. You've still got to find the sort of creativity and giving people an opportunity to do good selling. And that's not just they can do it naturally. They're going to need coaching and training and various follow-ups, etc. But I think as long as you've got the pressure of the unrealistic KPIs and quotas and other elements, that you're going to drive poor qualification, and everything's just a trickle down effect. Everything is a knock-on effect to the subsequent things.
it's sort of like get back the common sense into the system.
Yeah, I don't recognise my industry sometimes. There are some fabulous salespeople,
Of
some
course.
fabulous sales gurus, but there's still a problem. There's still a problem somewhere.
Yeah.
And the next part, I think, and this is a big part for me. I talk about it a lot. It's a pretty straightforward, strange one to hear, because everyone talks about things in a very deep, meaningful way. Knowledge. And I think here's the thing. Everyone sort of focuses, oh yeah, I know my product back to front. Okay, good for you, but that isn't really important. I break knowledge down into sort of three areas, but before I sort of get onto those, one of the things I say to a lot of people all the time is most salespeople don't know what they need to know, and most sales leaders don't know that they don't know it. Because everybody's sort of polarized on numbers and pipeline and how you're going to fill the gap of deals that have moved and blah, blah, blah. Rather than sort of focusing on the leading metrics, what do you know about them? Is this the right customer? Can we help? All those things we talked about in qualification. So I talk about things like the number one thing that I still find very weak is customer knowledge. What do we know about this customer? And going back to what I said earlier, the business problem, committed to doing it, can we fit it? But then you start to look at sort of really drilling down more. And a lot of people had sales methodology training. They're supposed to know this, do all this sort of discovery questions. Whether they do it or not, they don't retain their knowledge, or they don't capture it in a way that is reviewable, etc. So, and then customer knowledge is not, people talk about discovery, and I may have said it to you before. Discovery about an opportunity is, yeah, of course, it's quite important, but selling nowadays is more about people management than it is opportunity management, because you've got this wider group of people involved in the deciding and buying. So I talk about sort of buyer discovery is, what's your knowledge about the potential people that can get involved in this? You've got to go higher, wider, deeper. If there is, as we're told by Gartner, 11 plus people involved in the typical deal, 12 to 14 for technology sales, then I think most sales teams are probably missing half of them from what I'm seeing. So you've got to understand more about the people, the problems, and also, is there a process about how they're going to decide and buy? Because once you've got that knowledge, then you're in a better position to help them. And if you're in a better position to help them from a business perspective, they're going to appreciate that. They don't want to see their typical product-based salesperson. They're just going to put you in the bucket with everyone else. If you want to increase your conversion rate, gotta hate saying it, start helping the customer, stop selling to them. And a few people have said it, and it is a bit of a cringe-worthy statement, but there's a lot of value in saying that. Domain expertise. So we've got customer knowledge, domain knowledge. How do you fit in the grand scheme of things that's relevant to that customer in their domain? What do you know about other people in their industry? What problems that have they solved that you've helped them or you're understanding them? People want to hear about relevant examples of their peers in other organizations. So absorbing relevant domain knowledge. And finally, of course, product knowledge. You've got to be, I don't know what it was like for you, but I was a wing it, cavalier, maverick sales guy when I was younger, because I could be. I was the personality relationship selling. And I knew enough about the product, but I had a bunch of smart guys that would help me in the technical details. Nowadays, you need that expertise within your salespeople as well. Yeah. So knowledge is a big reason for poor performance, and I think the conversion rates. If you don't know enough about the customer, if you don't know enough the relevance of their domain, if you don't know enough about your product, then your conversion rate is going to be low.
I have two questions here for you, Kevin, before we move to the solution part of this discussion. One is that with so much of information, right? So one of the guests I had on the show, he said, look, once upon a time when we were selling, we had to wait for an annual report to be sent to us by some authority whom I had to write to saying, can you send me annual report? I'll wait for it to come in the mail. That's when I can look at what the company was doing and so on. Today, on your way to a meeting or 5 minutes before a meeting, you can go into the computer and you can search and you can find a lot of data. So where is actually the disconnect? Why is this disconnect? That we have this huge amount of information available to us, yet, like you said, we don't know enough about a customer that we are talking to.
Yeah, I grew up with all this financial reports and accessing it and desperately trying to link what we do to something that's in the financial report. And most of the time it's incredibly loose because we said, everyone's focused on, we're going to increase your revenue or reduce your costs or reduce your risks. Everybody tried to link what they did to that. How buyers think tends to be a little bit different. If you're talking to the CEO or maybe the CFO, sure. But how many people are pitching to the CEO and CFO or the COO? They're not. They're starting in a different level. And you have to talk, it's one step at a time. You've got to talk to the person about who's in that role, their persona. And I don't mean this sort of pigeonhole persona. Persona are, the typical problems they're facing in their roles, and you can base it on some assumptions you're seeing with other companies like those, and carefully crafted questions will sort of expose that. So I think let me take it back a bit. And one of the interesting, I spoke to the CTO once at the Royal Opera House. And he was the first person I ever asked this question to. And I sort of said, Joe, in all your careers as a CTO, how many times have you been cold approached by a salesperson with a complex solution that's ultimately led you to be aware of a problem that you weren't and initiate a project? 0 times. 0 times. So I think largely, and I've asked a bunch of other people that, and it's been the same answer all the time. So a lot of the time, salespeople wait for an opportunity to evolve. So, if there's a bandwagon, it's too late. You've got to build your own bandwagon. You've got more salespeople, especially in these times now of COVID, where people are really starting to focus on expenditure, and CFOs are more involved than they ever were before. Creation of opportunities yourself is more important. So every time you're waiting for information, you're not creating. I do think, sales guys need to wake up, and there's such a big advantage. If you can find the right ICP where you got a gut feeling they're going to be suffering with a problem that you can solve, then if you get in early, everyone knows the research that says the earlier you engage and prove value, the greater chances of winning. So I think everybody who waits for information And that information that's generically available to everybody, I mean, it's going to be information that everyone's going to be acting on if they're trying to sell. I think we should be out there making things happen, not waiting for things to happen.
Absolutely. I mean, that's my uh, problem with intent data. Intent data is too
Yep.
late. Intent data is too late, right? It's
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
so anyway. I think this is a good point to move to the solution phase. Kevin, how do we fix this? How do we fix this?
Well, it's just going to be like, I'm a career sales leader, and I think we're sales leaders are one of the biggest areas of problems. Um, Sometimes the people that get put in sales leadership are the wrong people. They try and take their successful sales mentality and force that upon their salespeople. They try and extol their brilliance on individuals rather than finding an individual's own brilliance. Because there was a time when people like me, this sort of outwardly going, but I'm going to say charismatic. I'll convince myself I'm charismatic. You could be
You
very
are, you are.
yeah. Oh, you're too kind. But now you can get these, very different salespeople. Far more considered, far more sort of low key, more introverted, super successful. So I think sometimes the obvious choice for sales leaders aren't always the best. And also, looking at someone saying, oh, we're going to make that person sales leader because they've had 25, 30 years experience in this industry. We've got to come at this with a fresh approach. When people talk to me about they've had sort of 20, 25, 30 years experience, I go, yeah, okay, that's great. But 20, 25 of them are no longer relevant because so much has changed. So I still think that if we appoint the right sales leaders who can come at it the right way, they can work and coach their team. Too many, I think, sales leaders, the old adage of stop working in the business, start working on the business. Sales leaders who are trying to do the selling for their salespeople, trying to tell them what they need to be. You've got to step back and start to think about. There's one of the biggest criticisms I have is one size fits all training, where someone comes in and they say, okay, this person's going to train you on negotiation, closing, whatever, and everybody sits there and we listen to it, and there's an assumption that everybody's at the same level and needs the same level of coaching, and that bothers me. So I think we have to go back, have the right sales leaders in place who are going to coach and train our people. We have to sort of get, these sales leaders will understand what the right metrics are to generate the right behaviors, rather than business leaders outside of sales concluding, what these things should be and driving them in sales. You need a strong-minded sales leader to come in and say, I'll take this role, I'll make this team better, but let's get one thing clear. This is how we need to do it. And I think there are successful sales leaders out there, but let me say one thing. You can look at sales leaders and go, wow, super successful. But guess what? They've got a fantastic company, a fantastic proposition, and they're riding the crest of a wave. You would have to be pretty poor to not be successful. And I'm not demeaning what they're doing, at all. I always look at, I'm a football man. When you get a coach who comes in and makes a super successful team out of a team that hasn't got high credibility, hasn't spent a fortune on players, but they turn this team of average, lower cost football players to win the major trophy. Wow. That is true leadership, who makes something out of next to nothing. You don't have to spend big. You don't have to have the very best to be successful. So I do think that you can look at a lot of sales leaders and go, yeah, well played, you've done a good job. But then you look at it and go, the money behind your lead generation system, your brand awareness, the money you're spending on your team and everything around you, it's pretty difficult not to be successful. The ones I admire are the true leaders that can make something happen without the resources of some of these other guys that everybody sort of has a trumpet fanfare for. But it's difficult to find those guys. There are good sales leaders that were good in the past that aren't necessarily adapting to the way the market is today. I've always been one of these people. January, January 1, start of a new year. Last year was last year. What have I got to do differently this year? How do I stay ahead of my competitor? What don't I know that I need to know? Continuous learning, continuous evolution. I probably said it to you before, but salespeople, sales leaders specifically, don't like change. Sales generally, we sell change. Ironically, we hate change. It's so weird. We're out there selling change management, but us change. So, I've been doing it successfully a certain amount of years. Da 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 da. Why do it? Get your sales leadership right. Get these people right. Give them the time and the tools and the support to make their team perform better. To actually take the pressure off them, qualify better, understand, coach them through it, be there for them, not just focus on the numbers, focus on the leading metrics about what they know about the people involved, what they know about the problems they're trying to solve, and what they're going to do about it. So I just think it's a step back.
Fantastic. So your focus is primarily on the human resource factor, and whatever that manifests. That's what I heard.
It's the foundation.
Yeah. I agree.
Around it, you've got to get the foundation right, and the foundation right is the right people in charge.
I agree. Before I let you go, I just wanted you to elaborate on how do you fix the ability to define your ICP, because that's another crucial factor which you mentioned now again, that you need to know who you are selling to. And while I know that if you have existing business, you should be able to look at the successful accounts, build a sort of a profile out of that. But the fact is, there are a lot more startups today than otherwise who possibly do not have access to that kind of data, which means they don't have a existing roster of clients on which they can build a look-alike sort of profile, right? What, according to you, is the best way to do this? Because that's absolutely crucial.
Yeah, I think, how do I look? Fishing. Where are you going with this, Kevin? So back in the day, because we're an island in the UK and fishing's a big industry, they would have nets that basically just caught everything. Big old net, throw it in, catch everything, and a lot of the time because of quotas we have, they have to throw things away. Ultimately, they perfected nets that are more designed to catch the type of fish that you want. And it evolves over time. It took a long time to do that. Excuse me. So if you're a startup, and a lot of the time, you come up with a good idea, but I would hope that people would say, I've come up with a good idea because they were aware of a problem and who that problem affected. Now, it's like all startups. You have to measure your aspirations. Being a startup and trying to land a whale is not realistic, because the big giant corporates don't want to do a business with a big startup. So in the early days, you're looking at an ICP and saying, okay, which are the sectors that we have probably got a best fit with, because it's a known problem that we can solve. It's a known problem that's having an impact on them as a business, and that it's got a high degree of priority. And the people inside. So you start to focus on the sectors, but then also focus on the size of organization, because there are certain types of organization that are more willing to do business with small early stage startups. As you grow your ICP, you can actually, expand it, because now you can say, okay, we know which sectors and whatever, and don't make it a generic big. People said to me, oh yeah, we sell to the software industry. Wow, that's a bit broad. That's as broad as it can be. But it's you realistically, you might have a customer base where you could sell to the software industry, but there will be early adopters in there. Which are the early adopters? Which are the ones who are trying to solve the problem the quickest, or are having the most impact on it? So really try to drill down. Don't make your ICP too big. I think that's the problem. People are, especially when you're a startup, it's like any customer's a good customer. Any money is good money. And we've been there. We've done that. But guess what? You dilute your efforts because you're going after too many deals rather than deals you could win and should win. by better focusing. So an ICP is something that you need to build sort of fairly early and be realistic, and build your organization slowly based on expanding that ICP. The more you have success, the more you grow, the higher up you can aim. The bigger organizations. I've seen too many startups try and win big deals, and occasionally they do win them, and then that big deal consumes all their resources and almost destroys them. Right. Because guess what? They want a huge amount of customization, So ICP, be realistic, sort of shoot for what you can really win. And sometimes, there's one of the things that I do in qualification, and you can do, is it product fit, is it value fit, is it technical fit, is it an economic fit, political fit? Is this organization likely to do business with an organization like you based on who you are, size of your organization, location? If they're not, then they shouldn't be in your ICP.
This is a new one, because I don't know how much of this data of the political fit is actually available, and that needs
it's opinion. It is so much in selling subjective, isn't it? Yeah. It really is. It's like, in my view, are they really? Because you look at the way, if I go through now the way I win orders, you can see the difference between the way these smaller organizations engage and buy from me and the way the larger organizations engage and buy from me. Because there are a lot of different layers of people involved in the procurement process, the compliance process, the security process, and so on. And that becomes consuming of time. And guess what? Every one of those hurdles is potentially one I could trip over. Right. As I get bigger, or as we all get bigger, and we've got more people that are experts in these particular areas that we can map across those people, sure, there's a greater chance of winning those. But, I know landing the big fish is that I suppose the route to success. And if you've got the guy that's whipping lots of fish out all the time, and guess what, they're feasting nicely, or the person who says, well, it's boom or bust, I want to land the big one, so we'll either gorge or starve. That's a high risk.
Absolutely.
So, drill down and try and win what you can realistically win. Certain companies do business with certain types of companies, and sometimes startups, we've got it a bit tougher than others.
Absolutely. Kevin, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts, and I hope we did cover everything that you wanted to talk about.
Look, you know me, I could talk till the cows come home, but I think no one wants to listen for me that long. There's lots of different things that we can focus on. I've taken it back to what I believe is the basics. Sure, you can get more granular on these things, but for now, they're good points to focus on.
Wonderful. Kevin, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks very much.